Good morning, class. This is a very exciting story today. It's narrative nonfiction, so you're going to be filled with facts, hopefully on a topic that you don't know anything about, but maybe you do have some past knowledge already on it. It's also going to be told in a very interesting story format. We're trying to figure out, as the essential question today, it says, how are all living things connected? We're going to have some connections here in this story. Maybe it's between the buffalo and this bird, or the buffalo and the grass, or the prairie dogs. The title of our story is The Buffalo Are Back. All of these pictures in our story today were actually painted by Wendell Minor. What an amazing job she did painting these pictures. In a time long ago, an orange buffalo calf was born, right here. He wobbled to his feet and blinked. A lark flew to the top of a 6-foot blade of grass and sang as sweet as a panpipe. A town of prairie dogs barked. The green gold grasses of the plains rippled like waves from horizon to horizon. On that day, in the 1800s, 75 million buffalo roamed in North America. In little more than 50 years, there would be almost none. How do you go from 75 million to almost none? In a little, what happened? The answer is the story of American Indians, the buffalo, and the grass. The American Indians. Notice the heading here. On the day that calf was born, the air was smoky. The Indians who lived on the plains were setting the grasses ablaze, as they had for thousands of years. The fire was good for the prairie. The calf may have been afraid of the flames, but they kept the trees from taking over the grasslands. The fire's ashes put nutrients into the soil, making the grass healthier for the buffalo to eat. So by burning all of this grass down, we actually were going to bring it back stronger and better the next year. By taking care of the grass, the Indians took care of the buffalo. In return, the buffalo took care of the Indians and the plains. The buffalo were the Indians' food and were used to make their shelter and clothing. The buffalo never ate too much grass, and their sharp hoofs helped rainwater reach into the soil, keeping the prairie healthy. The orange calf learned to roll in the dust wallow. He watched the prairie chickens show off their exotic feathers. From the Mississippi to the Rocky Mountains, and from the Gulf of Mexico to Canada, the buffalo herd grazed on the Great Plains. This week we are working on summarizing, and now we're going to take a little break here. Why did the Indians set grasses on fire? Now, summarize means to tell some of the key details in your own words. They set the grass on fire to help the grass grow better. They set the grass on fire so that the trees wouldn't take over the prairie. We heard about the Indians, now let's hear about the buffalo. In the mid-1800s, change came to the plains. First, it was the white fur hunters. They stacked the beautiful buffalo hides in pointed canoes and sold them east for profit. The American explorers came, who shot many of the animals just for fun. That's really sad. Buffalo made good targets for hunters because they are big and they often stand still. But it was the settlers from the east and the American government that killed almost all of the buffalo herds. After the Civil War, the government bought huge tracts as sections of land from the Indians. They forced many Indians to go onto reservations and sold the land to settlers. Families from Europe and East Coast rushed west to settle the rich black prairie land. But there was trouble on the plains. The government broke its treaty with the Indians, so the Indians fought back and won several battles against the United States Army. Then the government saw another way to defeat the Indians. Soldiers and settlers were encouraged to shoot every single buffalo that they saw, or drive the whole herd off a cliff. Without the buffalo for food, shelter, and clothing, the Indians could not survive on the plains. Isn't that really sad? So we see this connection. Buffalo and Indians. The buffalo kept the plains super great with their sharp hooves and allowing rainwater in. The Indians burned down the grasses so that they would grow better next year for the buffalo to eat, and then the Indians got to eat the buffalo. Now we take care of all the buffalo, and there's not going to be food for the Indians. Most of the last wild buffalo went down in dust and gunfire, said the great Sioux chief Sitting Bull, who defeated General George A. Custer at the Battle of Little Bighorn. A cold wind blew across the prairie when the last buffalo fell, a death wind for my people. And the settlers soon discovered a death wind for the prairie. The grass. With the death of the buffalo, the Indian wars were over. The settlers faced a new fight, the Battle of the Grasses. Over the eons, the prairie grass had adapted to the Great Plains' frequent droughts by growing tough roots to hold in the moisture. These roots were wide and deep and held the rich soil in place. The buffalo's sharp hooves and the Indians' prairie fires had helped keep the grasses healthy. But the new settlers did not understand the importance of the grasses. Early settlers were ranchers and cowboys. They brought fences and cattle to the plains. The cattle did not roam, so they ate too much of the grass within their fences. Their flat hoofs packed the earth. Air and rainwater no longer reached into the soil. So now we're destroying the soil. Later settlers wanted to farm the land, so they tore out grass and planted crops to sell. Steel plows and steam tractors were invented to conquer the grasslands, and the great plow-up began. Wheat, corn, soybeans were planted. These crops have shallow, fragile roots. At first, the crops flourished in the prairie sunshine and timely rains. New railroads carried the harvest to distant markets. This is sounding all great, but wait, it's going to get worse. Now, not one orange buffalo wobbled to its feet. The lark that had once eaten the insects living on the grasses did not sing. The prairie dogs were silent. Without the buffalo, without the grasses, without the Indians to care for them, the prairie was in danger. The settlers would soon learn why. Now, maybe you don't know much about plants, but deep roots hold on to soil. Shallow roots don't. And if we're not holding on to that soil, it could erode, as you're learning about science, the washing or blowing away of soil. How was the Great Plow both good and bad at the beginning? Well, it was good because it brought lots and lots of people to the West. It was good because it gave us lots and lots of corn and soybeans. It was bad because it was ruining the prairie grass. Oh boy, I don't know if you can see really good on my picture, so you should have your picture out, but those are locusts. Grasshoppers eat everything. Drought came as it had before. Billions of grasshoppers swept down on the plains. Long ago, when drought came and grasshoppers chewed the healthy grasses, the plants would grow back. Their tough roots always survived. But when the fragile crops were chewed by the grasshoppers, nothing grew back. Suddenly, the grasshoppers laid eggs and flew on. The farmers replanted their crops. They did not know they had begun to destroy the prairie. When the buffalo lived on the prairie, their sharp hooves helped rain reach deep into the earth, and the tough roots of the grass held in the wet. Now, no moisture remained in the soil, and the farmer's crop withered and died. In the 1930s, the plowed earth finally crumbled to dust. The wind eroded the land, picking up the dust and boiling into terrifying black clouds. The clouds rained dirt. Barns, farms, houses, and towns were buried beneath the dust. People coughed, choked, and grew ill. Many died. Hungry and penniless, plains farmers and townsmen packed up their belongings and sold their worthless land to the government. The prairie soil had blown away. The land was no longer rich. The farmers climbed into old cars and left the Great Plow-Up. The Great Plow-Up had been a disaster. In just 50 years, it had destroyed the buffalo, the protective prairie grasses, the Indians who cared for both. What could be done to save the prairie? The Prairie Comeback. In the beginning of the 1900s, Americans elected a president who had once been a hunter on the Great Plains. He He knew and loved the land and wanted to protect it for the future. Nature-loving President Theodore Roosevelt especially wanted to save the buffalo. He was very fond of the great American grays with its humpback and shaggy coat, so he sent a scout to look for wild buffalo. The scouts came home with nothing, all the scouts but one, a naturalist named W.T. Hornaday, looked and would not give up. On a tip from a Crow Indian, he rode his horse into a secluded meadow in Montana, a place that had been hidden away from the world. There before him grazed 300 buffalo. A little orange calf wobbled to its feet and blinked. A lark flew to a blade of grass and sang as sweet as a panpipe. There had been 75 million buffalo on the plains. Now there were 300 left in the wild. People who understood the land, led by Hornaday, knew the buffalo had to be saved. The president helped. Roosevelt established a national bison range in Montana and made it illegal to shoot any buffalo. Over the years, more land was set aside in the western state for the great grazing herd, which were to begin to grow. That's called Yellowstone National Park. We'll get to it. Thanks to Roosevelt, the orange calf of Montana romped with the other calves and rolled in the dust. Her herd grew in numbers. Many were sent to national parks and wildlife refuges that had been established to start new herds. That's a picture of Theodore Roosevelt. As the dust storms attacked farms and cities, the government worked to save the prairie. Farmers were taught to plant and grow crops in curves instead of straight lines. The contour, which means curves, plowing helped to prevent dirt from blowing away. Government workers planted trees with deep roots to hold moisture and soil and break the wind. When the rain returned, farmers planted grasses between their curved rows of corn to hold the soil in place. Crops flourished again. One day a young girl walked into her house in Kansas waving a 6-foot blade of grass. "Where did you find that?" her father asked. "That's buffalo grass. It's been extinct for years, or so we thought." "In my schoolyard," she said. "That is land that was never plowed," her father told her. Like many older people living on the prairie, he longed to see the buffalo grass again. "Let's try to find more of these tall native grasses," he said. Perhaps the tall grass could come back to the plains. People like the girl's father round up kids, parents, botanists, those are people who work with plants, farmers, and merchants. They searched the places the plows had never reached: graveyards, old railroad beds, and crumbling fence rows. There they found small strands of native grasses: bluestem, gamma, bunch, and buffalo grass. They raised them and sowed the seeds on abandoned farms and public lands. The grasses flourished, tall and graceful. Groups that work to protect nature purchased 30,000 acres where native grasses had been grown. This nature preserve in Kansas is called the Tall Grass Prairie Preserve. Into the tall grass, they released 300 buffalo. One morning, not too long ago, a young man just out of graduate school galloped his horse across the prairie preserve, counting buffalo for the buffalo census. Suddenly, he reined in his horse. An orange calf wobbled to its feet and blinked. We keep hearing about this calf. It's always a different one. "Welcome, little calf," the Wichita Indian youth called. "You are America's 200,081st buffalo." A lark flew to the top of a 6-foot blade of grass and sang as sweetly as a panpipe. The buffalo are back. 280,000 is nothing like 75 million, but we're getting closer. What can you predict about the future of the buffalo? Do you think they're going to survive? Well, with laws that you can't hunt them, they have a good chance. Other laws that make these nature preserves where the buffalo can live safely will also help the buffalo continue. What an awesome story. I hope that you learned a lot from it as well as enjoyed it. God bless your day.